الاجتماع الكندي الحائز جوائز عديدة عن كتاباته مهدي داريوس ناظمرويا في إحدى مقالاته بعنوان هل خطف مرسي الديمقراطية؟ يتساءل بعد إعلان النتائج رسمياً الدستور المصري المدعوم من الإسلاميين مرر باستفتاء عام وبدعم من ثلثي المقترعين تقريباً، إلا أن التحليل الإحصائي للنتائج أظهر حقيقة مختلفة تشير إلى أن النصر من خلال مشاركة ضعيفة هي صورة زائفة للعملية الديمقراطية، وهذا أمر لطالما تعودنا عليه حتى في الدول الغربية، حيث الأقلية تأخذ القرارات عن الأكثرية من الشعب تحت عباءة الديمقراطية. فماذا تعني الديمقراطية بالنسبة لمصر، وكيف من المفترض أن تتحقق؟
You asked a very fundamentally important question. Fundamentally not only for Egypt and this region, but for the entire world. Of course, this region is constantly looked down upon as an undemocratic place by countries in Western Europe or the United States. So I think discussing the nature of democracy is very important. What is the nature of democracy? It's not just voting. Voting is only a mechanism. It's not the actual democracy. Democracy is the participation of citizens in decision making. That's what it means. In the United States, North America, Western Europe, citizens are voting, but the votes are not, they don't have a say through those votes. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing in Egypt. People went to vote. In fact, it was actually a very low turnout for the referendum that happened in December 2012.
But officially they said no, they had a very big percentage of people who took part in the voting, and they voted pro the Constitution.
No, that's not correct. That's playing with numbers. That's what politicians do.
What can you tell us about numbers, please?
Well, I can tell you about the numbers was that the turnout was very low. Yes, the approval rating was over 60% out of the people that showed up. How many people showed up? It was about 32%, a little over 32% of eligible voters. 32% of eligible voters showed up, and only about 20.9% voted yes. 20.9% of all of Egypt's eligible voters voted yes. So that means a little over 13% of the entire Egyptian population basically approved of this
constitution.
Yes, the constitutional change. So 13%, a little over 13% approximately of the entire Egyptian population helped pass this. I don't think that's democratic. That basically means a little over 1 out of 10 people. So what about the rest of those 9 people out of the, a little less than 9, but
so what does that all imply, Mahdi?
That implies that Mr. Morsi, number one, they're playing with numbers, and they're playing with people's perception. But number two, it means that we had a constitutional amendment passed in Egypt that basically in many other countries, because of the low turnout, would have been rejected. So Mr. Morsi basically gave himself more powers, even after he said he wouldn't do that. In fact, he played a very dirty game, because a lot of people protested when he gave himself more powers. And he said, okay, I'm not going to do it. Well, and he quickly pushed this referendum without letting people organize. A lot of people weren't able to go to the polls, and he basically gave himself more powers and made
more
himself
prerogatives. Yes,
he basically became a new Mubarak.
What's your assessment of Morsi now after 1 year in office?
I don't think the man's done much. I think he's just making Egypt a weaker place.
I mean, he came with lots of promises. What did he achieve?
He hasn't achieved anything. He's just made Egypt's situation worse. I want to point a few things out. What's happening right now in Ethiopia is they're going to build a dam that's going to block
the Nahda Dam project, yes.
This is going to hurt Egypt. Morsi says it's fine. In fact, the experts he brought to talk about it, most people that are very well informed about this.
No, actually he didn't say that it's fine, you know, because the Ugandan president, he said that, well, Egypt cannot keep on hurting all Africa with its interests. You know, Egypt must think also about the interests of all Africa. So Morsi is trying also, you know, to provoke the Egyptians against their African neighbors.
Well,
to entangle them more in more problems with their neighbors also. Not just against Syria, but also, you know, he's cutting and severing ties with the Syrians, and now he wants to make problems with the neighboring countries in Africa concerning the Nile Basin issue and the dam of Ethiopia, and, you know, all these, in addition to the internal matters when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the people who are demonstrating for freedoms, for promises, for all these issues.
Well, I'm going to cover two things now because you brought Syria into the picture.
Yeah.
But
I mean, these all come in a one basket
of course,
together when it comes to Egypt.
The man's weakening Egypt. But Syria, I think that when he cut relations with Syria, in the first place, I think he only kept relations with Syria as a form of blackmail. He kept those relations to get more money from his paymasters in the Gulf. It was basically, he kept the door open. He didn't make the same mistake that the Turks did by cutting ties. He kept it open so he could basically get more money out of the Qataris and the Saudis over Syria. But one very important thing I want to emphasize is that he's cut his ties with Syria because the Gulf has pushed him. And why has the Gulf countries pushed him to do this? Because they're failing in Syria. His response to cutting ties is a response to the success of the Syrians in fighting the Takfiris. The retreat of the Takfiris is the reason why he's cut his ties with the Syrians. It's basically a response, and it shows that the project against Syria is failing. Now, jumping to Africa and Ethiopia, the man hasn't stood up for Egypt's interests at all. If the Nile is closed, this is their bread basket, farming, the economy, not just tourism. I mean, this is going to really hurt Egypt, and he's basically letting it go. He is creating problems with the rest of Egypt's
Africa.
neighbors,
Yes.
not just in Africa. I mean, broader neighbors, you know. He's
the surrounding neighbors.
Sure,
yes,
he's
yes.
creating, like his statements about Hezbollah, for example. The man is creating problems. He's basically because his policies are very bad now, he's distracting Egyptians also with these statements. These statements, it's a means of distracting them from the internal problems. But at the same time, what does it say when this man, because of the Gulf countries, doesn't want to restore relationships with Iran? Is it bad to have relationships with Iran? What does that say? Like, for some reason, it's wrong to have relationships with Iran. I mean, there's something, we have to pause and think. Why would they not want relationships with Iran? And why would he actually appease them?
Allow me here to comment on something. Deputy Supreme Guide of the Muslim Brotherhood, Rashad al-Bayoumi, in an interview with Al-Monitor, stressed that under President Morsi, Egypt will not turn its back on the United States. However, at the same time, it wants to deal with the United States based on a mutual relationship, far removed from the policy of leadership and subordinate that prevailed under the previous regime. Yet, the Brotherhood long and bitterly criticized Egypt's secular leaders, including the former President Hosni Mubarak, for acting as American lackeys by shunning Iran. They criticized Mubarak before coming to power. They came to power and they started, as we said, that they started this act of flirting with the Iranians, but nothing came back as they talked about before.
It's the same with Israel, though. They
They
always
were-
said
yeah,
we're
they
going to
were-
get rid of the peace
you
treaty,
know,
and look
but
what
they were in a position of opposition. This is what I'm going to ask you about is, you know, this kind of difference or this kind of discrepancy or this kind of hiatus between the Muslim Brotherhood leadership and their grassroots supporters, you know, because the Israeli flag is still waving in Cairo and the Camp David Accords remained untouched. You know, what does this kind of action, you know, create in the grassroots? Those who were always in a position of opposition of Israel.
Well, first of all, many of the people in the grassroots are very good people. We can't, when we criticize the Muslim Brotherhood, we have to be very clear and frank. We're criticizing their leadership. We're not criticizing all those good people who put their sweat and blood into putting them in power. Those are really many of them are very decent people. Even if you don't ideologically agree with them, they had good intentions in their support for the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, in regards to the Muslim Brotherhood's policies, there is a divide in the Brotherhood. It's not a homogeneous body at all. There's a lot of internal conflicts now, and there's a lot of people in the grassroots that are upset. I mean, there's a conflict within the Brotherhood, and it's not only at the level of the grassroots, even at the leadership level, but at the grassroots, there's a lot of people that are questioning, is this the revolution I want?
Even the economic policies of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt.
Well, the economic policies of the Muslim Brotherhood have not been Muslim at all. I mean, let's be very clear and frank. When it comes to people when it comes to the Muslim Brotherhood, and when it comes to their supporters, like Sheikh Qardawi, nothing about their economics is Islamic at all. There's nothing. Is Egypt still dealing with the IMF, where there's a system of interest which is against the Quran? Yes, of course. So I don't understand how a party that says they're fundamentally following the Quran and on the basis of Islam continues an economic policy like this. They never say anything actually about it, very little about economics. What they talk about is the superficial things, the controversial things, the things that will make the average person, take the average person's attention away from the basis. What is the basis of livelihood in Egypt and all other places? It's the economics. And when it comes to economics, these countries are still colonies, and the Muslim Brotherhood has helped keep them colonies.
What do you expect for Egypt in the coming days? Quickly, if I may ask.
It's very volatile. I mean, Morsi's unpopular, and he's just going to continue being more and more unpopular. Maybe he'll call in the military again. Maybe the military will take over. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in Egypt, but the Egyptian people don't want this man in power anymore.
Right. Award-winning author, sociologist, and geopolitical analyst from Canada, Mahdi Darius Nazemroaya. Many thanks indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome, sir. إذا لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدنا theinside@almayadeen.net. إذن theinside@almayadeen.net. من كل فريق عمل من الداخل من كل الميادين. السلام عليكم.